I'm Dr. Michael Klaper, and this may be the most important video that I have ever made. It's filled with big, bold ideas, and that's exactly what is required in this time of global climate crisis. I know it's easy to feel powerless as we watch the Earth warm and the polar ice caps melt, but there's actually a great deal that can be done to avert the impending environmental disasters that we all see looming in front of us. Old thinking got us into this problem, and new out-of-the-box thinking is required to get us out and to create a world of health and stability. This video offers some of that bold thinking in the hopes that it will give a glimpse to what is possible, since a vision of what is possible is the first step in making any bold societal change happen. The plant-based diet that has long been advocated as a major tool to improve physical health also offers the way to solve the climate crisis. And we must open our minds to imaginative ways to implement the solutions offered in this video. As Robert Kennedy once said, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream things that never were and ask, why not?" So, in the spirit of why not, I ask you to view and consider the possibilities in A Diet for a Livable Future. As I mentioned in the video introduction, this presentation deals with probably the most important subject that I have ever considered, and indeed that our world has ever faced. After a 47-year career in clinical medicine, I've left the clinics to spend my time and energy visiting the medical schools around North America, Europe, and Australia as part of our Moving Medicine Forward initiative, wherein I deliver a message to the young medical students about healing their patients with their diets before what I call pharmacosclerosis sets into their brains and into their approach to healing. I give the students the lecture I wish someone had given me 50 years ago when I was a first-year medical student. And I make it clear that what our patients are eating is the main reason they're sitting in front of us, obese, hypertensive, clogged up, diabetic, and inflamed. I deliver the important message that the fearsome diseases that occupy the majority of time and energy of Western physicians are eminently reversible conditions with the proper diet and lifestyle practices. And I make it clear to them that this information about how to reverse disease utilizing whole food plant-based diets should not be withheld from our patients. I describe in scientific detail exactly how whole food plant-based diets can arrest and reverse major diseases that these young healers are going to be spending the majority of their careers treating. And I share with them the joy of seeing their patients getting healthy right before their very eyes. I let them know that under the encouragement of a nutritionally aware physician or dietitian, every meal can help arteries to open and inflammation to subside. And the changes witnessed so often in the clinic and the office are so frequently spectacular to behold. Within days of starting to consume a whole food plant-based diet, the obesity begins to melt away. The arteries start to relax and open up, so high blood pressures begin to normalize. Angina pectoris fades away. Sore joints stop hurting. Blood sugars start to stabilize, migraine headaches improve, asthmatic lungs stop wheezing so much, psoriatic skin plaques begin to fade, normal bowel function returns, energy levels increase, and medicine cabinets empty. And you watch ill, overweight patients become leaner, healthier, and happier human beings with little and usually no need for pills, potions, and procedures. I tell the students, isn't this what every healer wants for their patients? The restoration of true health? Now, we must admit that such a diet is not a panacea for every disease, and there surely is a craft to using nutrition for optimal effect. But for the majority of diseases we now treat, whole food, plant-based diets, even with very occasional small amounts of meat if the patient insists, is usually the essential first step in arresting and reversing disease. How can we withhold such information from our patients? The principles of disease reversal are not difficult to master. Nourishing the body with healing food is not fringe nor extreme. It works. and it costs the patient nothing to choose the bean chili instead of the beef chili. I will be spending the rest of my medical career delivering this message to those in the healing professions as well as to the public. If you want to learn more about our work, about how you can arrange to have me speak at a medical school near you, and how you can support our Moving Medicine Forward initiative with a tax-deductible donation, go to our website, drklaper.com, and click on Moving Medicine Forward. Any support you could provide, including sharing the names of any medical students or faculty members at medical schools who might benefit from this message, would be greatly appreciated. Yet this presentation is not about cholesterol and colitis. It concerns my biggest, most important patient of all. I have long been a passionate environmentalist, stemming from my years as a boy on my uncle's farm in Wisconsin. During the 1950s, my summers were filled with the natural world. After doing my farm chores of milking cows, driving tractors, and slinging hay bales, I would walk in the forest and canoe the lakes and commune with the wonderful animals that populated my world. From hawks and hummingbirds to dogs and deer, from fireflies and frog ponds to canoes and campfires, the natural world surrounded me and permeated my understanding of the universe in which we all live. Long walks through Cathedral Forest instilled a sense of quiet and peace within me, and that inner sanctuary still resides in my spirit, even amid stressful situations. As I progressed in my education and learned about the basic sciences, my love for the earth only deepened. The physics of the natural world are so true and so beautiful. The way water flows, the way clouds form, from the way our living planet rumbles and quakes and renews itself, to the constant presence of gravity and the speed of light and sound. Such physical manifestations of the truth of the universe are manifested everywhere on our planet. The biochemistry of life is exquisite, and the biology that springs forth from that chemistry, from microbes to mighty elephants, inspires in me the love and reverence for the mystery and majesty that we call this miracle of life. I love everything about this amazing creation which we've been given, and my appreciation only increases when I can view the earth from a higher perspective, namely about 6,000 feet of altitude, when I became a pilot. I fly airplanes. I love to fly, and I would be up in an airplane every day if I could. Aviation teaches so many lessons, but the most life-changing lesson for me were wrapped in the visions that unfolded beneath my wing from the left-hand seat of my Piper Cherokee as I flew over Northern California and the Great Plains of the Midwest. Much to my dismay, I looked down and saw the mountainsides scalped of their forests. I saw rivers running brown with topsoil after rainstorms, and rivers running dry when the water has been sucked from them to irrigate pasture fields or water animals. I saw rivers and lakes dying from pollution, and I read of rainforests being clear-cut to make grazing land and cropland for cattle raising in the Amazon. When I look at my beloved home planet as a medical patient, I'm concerned, as any physician would be. She's running a fever. Her temperature is significantly elevated, and it's going up. Her digestive system of soils that recycle her nutrients have been poisoned and are eroding. The circulatory system of her rivers and lakes have been polluted and clogged. And like any patient in respiratory failure, her carbon dioxide level is rising. This patient's in need of intensive care. She should be in an intensive care unit if we had one that big, so I guess we'll just have to create one. And the inhabitants on the Earth's surface are not faring so well either, as every 4 seconds on this planet, someone dies of starvation, and 3 out of 4 of them are little children. All of this was made abundantly clear to me in 1986 when I read the landmark book Diet for a New America by author John Robbins, who was formerly heir to the Baskin-Robbins ice cream fortune. I highly recommend this book because in its pages, Mr. Robbins makes clear that so much of the environmental devastation we faced is the direct result of industrial-scale animal agriculture, which, in turn, stems from our insatiable appetite for animal flesh on our plates. Let's consider the many ways in which industrial-scale meat production is so toxic to the natural world upon which we all depend. Deforestation. By far, the most grievous sin humans inflict upon the healthy ecosystem is the removal of the forests. Humans have been deforesting the earth to build their civilization since, well, the beginning of civilization. To this point in time, over half the trees on planet Earth have been cleaved off and cut down. The extent of the deforestation can clearly be seen in these map diagrams. The top diagram was the extent of forest cover before the white man stepped foot in North America. Back then, the forest canopy was so thick that a squirrel in Minnesota could jump up into the treetops and jump from tree to tree to tree to tree and not lay foot on the ground until she came out in Florida. The second diagram in the middle shows the tree cover 230 years later in 1850. By then, civilization had pushed in from the eastern seaboard because there was about 20 million people of European extraction on the continent by then. But then, trees were still being felled with hand axes and two-man saws, which were not very efficient. So, though some cleared areas are evident in the Midwest and along the eastern seaboard, the forest cover was still substantially intact and healthy. But the bottom figure describes the situation a mere 70 years later. By 1920, there were now over 100 million new Americans, and the power chainsaw had been invented along with the diesel logging truck. By this time, the rich forests of the eastern half of the continent had largely been cleared away, and assault was already being launched on the western forests. Now the question remains, why were the forests cleared? Not to make room for cities. Cities take up very little land area on the map of the continent. No. The main reason that the forests were cut down and the land cleared was to grow animals for their meat, or the food to feed the animals, so we can slaughter them and eat their flesh. Let's be clear, when you drive through Iowa and see all that corn growing for miles, that corn is not going for tortillas and cornflakes. When you drive through Illinois and you see vast fields of soybeans as far as your eye can see, those soybeans are not destined for tofu and soy milk. The feed corn and soybeans are for animal food to be shoveled down the gullets of hundreds of millions of cows and pigs and chickens and sheep and other animals to fatten them for slaughter. American agriculture is about growing animal flesh. The relentless clearing of the forest to convert it to grassland or grazing land or cropland to grow animal fodder continues to this day. And it is especially rapacious in South America, where an acre of fertile rainforest is being cleared out. The acre is about a football field, and a football field is being cleared every second to make grazing land and crop land for beef. And very importantly, to keep the forest cover from growing back, we burn it. This is a NASA photograph from 2019 showing the fires burning on planet Earth over a 10-day period in May. Overwhelmingly, these fires are set to clear land to graze cattle or to raise their food. Now, when the forest is burned to convert it to pasture, the carbon in the wood, in the trees, is emitted into the air as carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas that warms the earth. And that acreage is now converted to grassland where cattle are grazing, so its ability to sequester carbon back into trees again is lost. And to make things worse, the cattle then chew up the grass and belch it out as methane and carbon dioxide, making the global warming problem worse even still. Understand this, more greenhouse gases have been emitted from land use change, that is, converting forests into pasture land and cropland, than from all the burning of fossil fuels in history. Here's an important number. The total amount of carbon dioxide that has been released into the Earth's atmosphere since 1790 is 240 billion tons, or 240 gigatons, largely from clearing of land for cattle. We'll come back to why that number is important in a few moments, because it is, but let's consider other forms of ecocide that is wrought by animal agriculture. Raising animals for our food is responsible for the plundering of the precious soils we use to grow our food. After every rainstorm, hundreds of millions of tons of prime Midwestern topsoils wash off from vast fields of corn, soybeans, and alfalfa, all intended for the gullets of hundreds of million cows and pigs and chickens and other animals destined to be eaten by humans. And these rains turn the rivers and streams of America and the rest of the world brown with topsoil after every downpour. This is the soil in which our children will be growing their food. How much soil is being lost? If you are standing by the Mississippi River at New Orleans, prime American topsoil is flowing past you into the Gulf of Mexico at the rate of a dump truck load a second. And the problem is not just the loss of this precious topsoil. The soil has been drenched with hydrocarbon pesticides and herbicides. These are toxins that kill fish, amphibians, and many other life forms unfortunate to be in this running water. The topsoil is also drenched with fertilizers made from ammonia and phosphate. And when this nutrient-rich soil flows into the Gulf of Mexico, it fosters a massive bloom of algae in the ocean water. When the algae dies, the decomposing plant mass sucks oxygen out of the water. As a result, there is a hypoxic dead zone the size of the state of New Jersey growing in the Gulf of Mexico as the Mississippi River daily dumps this toxic load of soil from the Midwest into the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Water depletion. Producing meat, dairy, and eggs is a thirsty business. And the majority of water used in North America goes not to cities for people to drink, it goes to irrigate fields of feed corn, soybeans, and alfalfa, as well as to water cattle and flush out slaughterhouses. A single egg takes 53 gallons of water to produce. That's 2 bathtubs full of water, while a pound of chicken takes 468 gallons of water. 1 gallon of cow's milk requires 880 gallons of water to produce, while a pound of beef requires 1,800 gallons of water. That would fill the average bathtub 23 times. Water tables from Florida to the Ogallala Aquifer in the Midwest are dropping steeply as water is being sucked out for animal agriculture. It seems such a shame to plunder this ancient water supply that has been around since the dinosaurs for something as transient as a fast food meal. Water pollution? Raising animals for meat is a dirty business that exacts a terrible toll upon the nation's rivers, streams, and lakes. Animals destined for food annually produce 1 billion tons of manure, far more than can be absorbed by the land as fertilizer, and as a result, the runoff from the massive feedlot facilities has grossly contaminated rivers and streams across the continent. And now, fully 1/3 of the nation's rivers and streams have been polluted by animal manure. Tyson Foods, America's largest producer of meat, puts more toxins into our waterways than ExxonMobil and Dow Chemical combined. Pesticide and herbicide use? It's said that we will be known as the society that grew its food with poisons. Every year we spray hundreds of millions of gallons of toxic hydrocarbon pesticides and herbicides upon the land, which then seeps into the water supply. We are spraying oil into the soil to grow our food, which is a toxic practice to be sure. And a particularly dangerous molecule is glyphosate, known commercially as Roundup. This is a water-soluble herbicide that has been linked to severe diseases like cancer and autism. But most worrisome, because it's water soluble, it has found its way into aquifers, lakes, rivers, and into the rain. Roundup now permeates the bodies of most every human and animal on Earth with unknown consequences. And the confiscation of the land for our meat production has come at the cost of the extinction of countless wild creatures. The vast fields growing homogeneous acres of feed crops were once productive forests or stately grasslands, teeming with millions of creatures. We are plundering their habitat and driving the animals to extinction, and they are disappearing forever from our world, traded for cheap cheeseburgers, and we are much poorer for the bargain. As shown here, in the years between 1970 and 2012, fully 38% of the large land animals have been exterminated. And in our freshwater lakes and rivers, 81% of the frogs, salamanders, turtles, and fish have disappeared. We are plundering the vast ocean of their creatures, and in the same 42 years, fully a third of all marine life has been extirpated from the seas. These colorful circles have an alarming tale to tell. On the left-hand side, the large green circle labeled wild animals represents the biomass of total living non-human animals 10,000 years ago. The small green circle on top was the biomass of total humans walking the earth at that time. As seen in the 1970 grouping, the mass of wild animals has shrunk by over a half, while the mass of humans and their food animals have grown massively. The purple circle on top is all the corn, soybean, alfalfa, and other fodder grown to feed these animals. Moving to the right, by 2010, you can see the light green circle representing wild animals is now down to a tiny fraction of what it was when humans began to walk the earth. The human population by 2010 had doubled over the 1970 number, while the number of farm animals had doubled once again. The amount of animal fodder raised to produce all this meat has increased by 5 times. The implications of the decrease of the wild animals is ominous and sad, and is explained to us by Dr. Sailesh Rao of the Climate Healers.
My name is Sailesh Rao, and I'm one of the original engineers of the internet. In 2014, researchers at the World Wildlife Fund released a report saying that between 1970 and 2010, in just 40 years, the population of wild vertebrates decreased by 52%. Then 2 years later, they released the second report saying that between 1970 and 2012, the population of wild vertebrates decreased by 58%. So from these 2 data points, you can perform a simple math calculation to tell you that at the current rate of decline, 100% of wild vertebrates will be gone by 2026. This is year 0, the year when all wild animals are gone. It turns out that animal agriculture is not only the number 1 source of carbon emissions, it is also the number 1 source of land use on the planet. All over the world, humans are destroying original forests to make room for grazing animals or to grow crops for feeding animals. And then humans are using sophisticated geolocating technology to locate the last remaining schools of fish. And finally, we are pouring all these toxins into the environment, which is killing insects and which kills the birds which eat those insects. So we are attacking wild animals on land, in the ocean, and in the air. And this leaves wild animals no room to survive. We did some calculations. We took all the land that is currently being used for animal agriculture and restored the native forests that were there on that land in 1800. And it turns out not only that he could sequester more carbon than we have added to the atmosphere since 1750, but he also restored the natural habitat for wild animals to live. Is their world, too. So this is entirely possible. We can bring back the forests and we can heal the climate. And in the process, ensure that year zero never becomes a reality.
This set of circles are the most alarming of all. If we do not change our current methods of food production, you can see the amount of wild animals by 2026 is approaching zero. The human population will have increased massively once again, while the amount of farmed animals will dwarf the human and wild animal populations. As can be seen by the purple circles, growing the food to feed all these cows, pigs, chickens, and other farmed animals will drain massive amounts of our resources. But the most ominous aspect of this diagram are the two small green circles to the far lower right. These circles represent the number of humans on Earth by the middle of next century, which, as you can see, has decreased drastically, while the amount of wild animals stays essentially the same. I shudder to think of the forces that are going to reduce the massive human populations represented by the three large circles in the 2026 scenario to that one small circle in the bottom right of the diagram. And finally, the greenhouse gases themselves that are driving the warming of the planet. What is the role of animal agriculture in generating the carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide? The numbers are staggering to consider. Every year on planet Earth, we Homo sapiens raise and slaughter 74 billion living creatures. Every one of these cows, pigs, chickens, sheep, and other animals are breathing out carbon dioxide. And most, especially cattle, are belching out methane. Most of these animals are fed grains that have been raised with ammonia-based fertilizers that release nitrous oxide into the air. So raising all these animals directly contributes to the massive amount of greenhouse gases that are being put into the atmosphere. And again, to create new grazing land and to keep the forest from growing back once it's been cleared, it's burned, as this NASA photograph reminds us. As a result, according to Dr. Rao and other researchers, the correct estimate for the greenhouse gas emissions contributed by animal agriculture is at least 87%, far more than the 15% estimated by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Now, one may think, hey, what about all the trucks on the road burning diesel fuel? Surely transportation contributes a great deal of greenhouse gases. That can't be neglected. That's true. Transportation certainly contributes a lot of fossil fuel burning. But the differentiation between the greenhouse gases released from animal agriculture and that coming from transportation, that differentiation evaporates in the face of one question. What's in the trucks? Most of the agriculture industry is in those trucks. Those trucks are carrying fuel and tractors and machinery and parts and fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides and other agricultural chemicals. Those trucks are carrying cattle and billions of animals to slaughter and carrying the meat that comes from them after the slaughter. The restaurant industry is in those trucks. The fast food industry is in those trucks. Think of all the cars and trucks on the road burning oil, traveling to steakhouses and restaurants to consume meat. Our voracious appetite for meat is responsible for putting so many of those trucks and cars on the road, all burning fossil fuels. And consider the fossil fuels that are burned in the actual production of meat. Consider all the tractors now plowing fields to grow animal fodder. Think of all the truck engines running on farms and in farming communities. Think of all the millions of irrigation pumps pumping water up from ancient aquifers to irrigate alfalfa and fodder fields. And consider all the oil being burned to generate electricity, to power the irrigation pumps, to power the slaughterhouses, to power the hundreds of millions of refrigerators and freezers in homes and restaurants that keep meat cold. After all, you have to refrigerate meat, dairy, and eggs immediately or they will spoil. You don't have to refrigerate barley and beans. So when we hear estimates of 87% as the contribution of animal agriculture to greenhouse gas emissions, it's not an exaggeration. The point is one cannot arbitrarily differentiate between fossil fuels being burned for meat production versus transportation. Meat production and animal agriculture have their tentacles into the entire food production industry and into our entire economy. So much fossil fuels are being burned for meat production and consumption. And we need to recognize that it's our voracious appetite for animal flesh that is driving so much fossil fuel burning and the destruction of our ecosystem and of our future. Well, this is no time to play helpless victims. We have a choice in what we eat and how we live our lives. And we need to make the right choice because in so many cases, it's the children that pay the price. We are plundering their future for cheap cheeseburgers today, and it's just not a fair thing to do. In 1986, after reading the book Diet for New America, I joined forces with the author, John Robbins, to found the nonprofit organization EarthSave. Through it, we tried to deliver the plant-based message to as wide an audience as possible. Here we are in Los Angeles with our friend, the late actor River Phoenix, who was an ardent supporter of our work. In 1986, we were still imbued with the energy of the first Earth Day in 1970. Here you see a picture from that event where the sign being displayed states that if we don't curb our environmental problems by 1990, we can kiss our Earth goodbye. Well, we surely blew right past that warning sign from 30 years ago. John Robbins and I have spent the past 35 years trying to convince people that unless we change our diet and lifestyles, we're going to suffer grave consequences in the ecosystem upon which we all depend. And that, of course, will have grave consequences for each of us. Over the almost 4 decades of our work together, the friendship between John Robbins and myself has endured and thrived. Unfortunately, our message has largely gone unheeded. Those leaders who could have listened, who could have changed, who could have led us in ways of truth and harmony with the earth and each other, who could have made such a difference, did not have the vision or the courage to make the choice for wiser ways to feed our bellies and fuel our cars. And so we settled for business as usual, focusing upon corporate third quarter profits rather than upon our children's futures. And now the earth is getting measurably hotter. The polar ice caps are melting and the sea levels are rising. These poor polar bears are on these icebergs largely because of our insatiable desire for cheap meat. We've treated insects as horrid pests to be exterminated with toxic pesticides. And now we face a world without bees. The bees that would pollinate the flowers that soothe our eyes and grow as our fruits and vegetables. And how we have ravaged the oceans of our planet. Each year, humans catch and kill 1.3 trillion sea creatures as by-kill, as we plunder the ocean for healthful fish, rich in omega-3 fats for our hearts. But for every piece of fish on the plate caught with miles-long nets that scoop up every living creature unfortunate enough to be in its path, there are dozens of drowned seabirds and whales, dolphins, sharks, turtles, and rays that the sustainably caught marketing label disguises from our awareness. We are strip mining the oceans. We are clear cutting the seas, like we have done with the forests. It's time to let the oceans heal. After all, most fish are contaminated by measurable levels of mercury, pesticides, and microplastics. We need to stop seeing fish as health food and rather see it as a health threat. It's time to let the fish off the hook and let the oceans rebalance and restore themselves. The human population continues to explode, and there will soon be 9 billion human mouths to feed. How will we meet this challenge? It couldn't be more urgent to come up with a practical solution, since recent reports indicate that the Earth is getting hotter now, faster than previously predicted. And yet we continue to burn the Earth on a daily basis. Even though the temperature is rising, we have to ask, what are we doing? Up until now, what we are doing is what these people are doing. It seems like such a typically human 21st century response. Yes, the forest is on fire, but I don't want to let it distract me from making my putt. What is it going to take? Our current U.S. government in Washington does not seem to want to help. Here's a page from the website of the Environmental Protection Agency telling children about climate change and what they can do about it. What are the children told that they can do? Well, they should do an energy audit of their school and see if there are any window frames that need insulating. Not a word is mentioned on the website about the true causes driving most of the global warming, namely the meat and dairy-based meals that the children are going to be served in the cafeteria in the school day after day. My heavens, what a bleak picture. So what are the answers? Wherein lies hope? You want answers? Well, let's try these on. It's not too late. Actually, the answers are pretty simple. Here's the realities that could save us. Since feeding humans directly with whole plant foods raised for human consumption is so much more efficient than growing grains and feeding the grains to animals and then slaughtering the animals and eating the animals, a global transition to a predominantly plant-based food source could feed all the 9 billion people who will be on planet Earth in 2050 a nourishing diet on about a quarter of the land currently used to grow food crops for animals. The following graphic makes this clear. A person eating a typical meat and dairy-based standard American diet requires 2 football fields of animals and energy to feed themselves for a year. After all, most grain shoveled into an animal ends up coming out the back end as manure, or is burned off as heat, or it turns into bone and blood and hide and hair and things that people don't eat. So feeding grains to animals is extremely wasteful of energy that could be used to fuel human beings directly. Those same 2 football fields of land planted with beans and greens and fruits and vegetables and other nourishing plant foods would feed 14 people for that same year. That means that if everyone in the world went vegan in their diet overnight, it would free up a land area the size of the continent of Africa. Of this, only 20% of the land would be needed to grow food for the 7 billion new herbivorous people on Earth. So that would permit, on just half of the remaining former cropland, letting the original forest return. As the trees mature, the growing forest would take massive amounts of carbon out of the air and store it in the trees as wood. It's nature's natural carbon capture mechanism. That's all we need to do. Evolve to a plant-based diet and then stand back and let the trees grow. Here are the numbers that explain why it works. The top green arrow signifies that there are currently 47 million square kilometers of land now growing crops for grazing animals. The second green arrow below it shows that if only 20 million of these 47 million square kilometers, less than half the land, were allowed to revert to the original forest, then, as the third green arrow shows us, 265 billion tons, 265 gigatons of carbon dioxide will be taken out of the air and made solid in the form of wood as the forest matures. As Dr. Rao said, 265 gigatons of carbon dioxide will be sequestered on just 20 million square kilometers of mature forest. Well, that number is greater than the 240 gigatons of carbon dioxide that have been added to the Earth's atmosphere from all the land clearings since 1750. This alone would permit a global healing to proceed. As the forests return, the earth will heal. The soils will stabilize and replenish themselves. The rivers will run clean and clear again. The oceans will begin to heal, and the destructive global warming will begin to reverse as forests around the globe return. There will be enough food to feed all the world's billions of humans, and so the hunger and suffering and the wars caused by such scarcity can begin to recede. The biology allows for all this healing to happen. The earth knows what to do if we just start to live harmoniously with it and let it heal. So exactly what can each of us do? Where does lie hope? Well, 3 steps are involved. 1, educate yourself about the issues. 2, transform yourself into an even more powerful being. And 3, organize yourselves for effective action. As Francis Moore Lepay says, hope doesn't come from calculating whether the good news is winning out over the bad. It's simply a choice to take action. So to start your self-education on this ultimately important topic, I'd strongly urge you to go to the website of Dr. Richard Oppenlander called comfortablyunaware.com. Comfortably unaware is just where the meat and dairy industry wants us, so we keep eating those burgers and not caring about what it does to the planet. Watch the videos on his website and read his book of the same name, and you will become aware of the scope of the problem. Dr. Oppenlander makes it clear that we can put solar panels on everyone's house and give everyone a solar electric car, but unless we change our diet from our current animal-based one to a plant-based diet, nothing is going to make any difference in averting the ecological disasters that we face. Also, go to the website of the Climate Healers at climatehealers.org and read the white paper authored by Dr. Sailesh Rao. In it, he will make clear the entire system's approach to the problem in a simple and easy-to-understand method. Go to my website, drklaper.com, and click on Resources and download my 3-page handout on healthy eating and living. Go to the website forksoverknives.com and see the film of the same name. It will change your life as you witness people making themselves healthier by eating a plant-based diet. While you're at it, give a copy of the video or a link to the website to your doctor and discuss the film with her after she sees it. She and her medical colleagues will benefit greatly from viewing this video. If you need further guidance in knowing how to make delicious food actually appear on your table, go to the website of forksoverknives.com and check out their recipes, meal planners, and all the other aids in making a successful plant-based transition easy and delicious. If you're a healthcare professional, these valuable websites and books constitute a virtual education in themselves in applied nutrition and lifestyle medicine, with several of these organizations offering nutrition-based courses for certification. The time has come for us to transform ourselves from a predator species to a caretaker species that involves leaving meat eating and meat production behind. There's only one hillside in this picture. The fence down the middle has kept cattle from foraging on the right side of the hill, and you can see the lush results that came from this simple maneuver. As the climatehealer.com website tells us, that's climatehealer.org, tells us the transformations required are those of common sense and of the heart. We must go from a species that normalizes violence to one who normalizes nonviolence and healing, from a society that creates diseases and divisions to one that creates health and unity. And very importantly, as Mahatma Gandhi said, there is no social change without personal change. It's up to each of us to transform ourselves into the change we wish to see in the world. So start the journey of empowerment with yourself. Make a move towards better health. Start getting yourself stronger. You're going to need it. If you're a vegetarian but still consuming dairy products and eggs, it's time for us to get real about the true cost of dairy products. I spent many hours in the dairy barn, and though that industry would like us to think that the cows are happily giving milk in the dairy barn and no animals are killed because you don't have to kill the cow to take the milk, I know different. Every dairy farmer knows that the dairy industry is a cruel and sad one. I've spent many hours in dairy barns, and I know that these beautiful female passive animals were all forcibly impregnated, as seen in the picture in the upper right photo. They then carry their babies for 9 months, just like human mothers do, and they give birth, and then they have their infants taken away from them within 48 hours so the dairy producer can harvest their milk for sale. Look at the photo in the upper left. The tears coming from these animals' eyes are real tears. There's a sadness to the dairy barn because all of these animals in the stanchions are new mothers who've had their infants taken away from them. The dairy industry is a death industry. All the little male calves are slaughtered at 4 months for veal, and all the dairy cows will eventually be slaughtered after a few years of calves and milk for hamburger when their milk production declines after a few years. Despite the image the dairy industry tries to portray of cows living long, happy lives giving their milk, the dairy barn really is just a short stopping off place on the way to the slaughterhouse. And the amount of water consumed and the amount of manure produced to create the suffering-filled white liquid makes dairy operations disasters for the planet. Make the move if you're vegetarian and become vegan in your diet and your lifestyle. Your health and the planet, not to mention the cows, will all benefit greatly. If you're already vegan, consider stopping doing at least one thing that's been dissipating your energy. Make one move. Perhaps it's time to stop eating sugar as a food. Perhaps it's time to cut back on your coffee intake and to start avoiding processed foods. Maybe it's time to start getting enough sleep, to drink more water, to control your anger, whatever it takes to make you a better, more effective person. Get yourself stronger, you're going to need it, so start moving. Maybe it's time to begin a yoga practice or meet a friend for a daily power walk or work out at the gym. Anything that gets you stronger and more effective in this world is worthwhile doing. Certainly changing our food choices is the one thing we can all do now, and it costs nothing, as I said, to order the bean chili instead of the beef chili. Now, there's going to be some people who are anxious about changing the way they've eaten all their lives. Some people get anxious about most any kind of change. But I'll point out that we now live in an era of disruptive technology, and old classic forms passing away has now become commonplace. We've all seen manual typewriters, dial telephones, reel-to-reel tape recorders, all become antiques of the past. And we used to accept a lot of practices as normal that we wouldn't consider doing today. In New Bedford, Massachusetts in 1850, the rock star heroes of the town were the whale harpooners, who used to thrust sharp harpoons into the brains of living whales. Today, we all reject that barbaric slaughter of sentient beings as a grotesque anachronism. Even more horrifying, we used to buy and sell black people as the white man's slaves, and we considered, the white man did, that practice as the proper order of things. We are universally horrified by that idea today. Will we not look back at the industrial production and slaughter of millions of animals and the devouring of their flesh as something in our barbaric past that we left behind as we became more enlightened as individuals and as a society? Surely leaving meat eating behind should not be that difficult. It should recede into our past like we let the whaling industry and slavery do. It should be becoming something that we used to do, especially now since there are so many delicious plant-based burgers to put into the bun to replace those made of beef. And for those who are concerned that an evolution from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet will upset the economy, I can assure them that such transition will actually save our economy. As we become a healthier population from adopting a whole food plant-based diet, we're going to save trillions of dollars annually in healthcare costs, from surgeries not done, from costly scans not performed, from intensive care unit beds not occupied, and most importantly, because breadwinners, the job creators, and the wage earners will not be waylaid by illnesses. They will not be getting diabetes or suffering strokes in the primes of their lives. They will continue to create jobs, pay taxes, and support their families and communities. We'll also be saving trillions of dollars by not having to mitigate damage from climate change, flooding, and fires as the forests regrow and sequester carbon dioxide out of the air. There will be money to fix the roads and bridges and infrastructure, to provide scholarships for young people, to put internet in everyone's home. All this will be the dividend from the plant-based dietary evolution that we need to engineer in the very near future. But what about the farmers and the ranchers? Wouldn't we be throwing them off their land? What are they going to do? No, the farmers and ranchers are not the enemy. We are not throwing them off their land. They're our friends and our neighbors, and they are growing our food for us. Don't make them suffer. Help them make this transition. Here's a bold idea that would help. Why don't we build a few less aircraft carriers and close several of our 700 overseas military bases and use the billions of dollars saved to create the Farmers and Ranchers Transition Administration to support our food-growing neighbors while they make the transition from an animal-based agriculture to a plant-based agriculture. Help these people. They don't have to run cattle on their land or run a dairy operation on their acres. If land can grow grass for cattle to eat, it can grow plants for people to eat. Send these people to community college to learn how to grow new crops. Teach them to grow vegetables, fruit orchards, industrial hemp, or to use agroforestry techniques to grow food within the forest as the trees come back. Help these people find a way to stay on their land and to grow food for people directly. Purchase their equipment for them, buy their seeds for them, insure their crops for 10 years, send their kids to college and pay the mortgage on their land for 10 years. Help these people. Don't make them suffer, and rather ease their way through this important transition. Clearly, the physics and biology exist to permit all of us on Earth to thrive by rapidly evolving our diets to predominantly plant-based ones. All we need is the widespread understanding of the desirability, actually the necessity, of this transformation and the political will to do it. The time for action has arrived. Remember, hope is not what we find in evidence, it's what we become in action. So realize you're not alone. Look around you. Connect with someone you know or just met, or find an organization with similar goals as yours online. Everyone can do something. We can all reduce or better eliminate the animal flesh and dairy products from our diet. But everyone has a gift. What's your gift? What can you contribute? At a minimum, you can be an example to your family and friends. People observe what you do. They observe how you eat and how you look. So set a good example of healthy, plant-based living. Each time you invite people over for a meal, the food you serve can be a lesson in how delicious plant-based eating can be. One bite of tofu lasagna or a hearty lentil stew can change a person's life. Don't be afraid to put on potlucks to educate your friends and family, and send your children to school with plant-based food. Recommend websites for them to visit and films for them to see. On a regional level, find out where your food and water comes from and what you can do to protect them. Consider joining a community-supported agriculture organization, a CSA, and thus have organic produce delivered to your door each week while you support your local organic farmers. On a national level, write your congressperson to let them know how you feel about these issues. If you don't know who your congressperson is, just go to whoismyrepresentative.com and type in your zip code. Here's how to write such a letter. Dear Honorable So-and-so, tell them that the nation's excessive meat production and consumption is destroying our health and the environment, and that you no longer want our government to subsidize industries that promote illness and environmental destruction. Urge them to not support any legislation or subsidies or policies that promote industrial meat or dairy production, and for them to do all they can to pass legislation that promotes plant-based agriculture, as well as plant-based nutrition programs in government-sponsored institutions like schools, prisons, and in the military. I strongly suggest you join and support the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine at pcrm.org. PCRM is very politically aware, and if they contact you about a specific piece of legislation to support or oppose, please follow their lead and let your congressperson know how you feel about the issue. And internationally, know there are people awakening to the reality of the vegan diet and lifestyle around the world, and you have brothers and sisters in the vegan movement on every continent. If you don't know the app called Happy Cow, download it, and it will direct you to vegan and vegetarian restaurants and stores near you locally and in every city around the globe. This transformation is doable. We can do this. We must do this. In today's world of global communication and the internet, changes in the public's understanding and attitude can change very quickly. The goal is to make meat eating as uncool as wearing fur and smoking cigarettes. We need some magic. We've seen magic before. When I was growing up, the Berlin Wall separated East Berlin from West Berlin and was such a formidable structure symbolizing Soviet power that we felt it was going to be there forever. But 28 years of blue jeans, Beatle music, and Western culture transformed the idea of the wall and then the wall itself. And on one weekend in 1989, we saw that wall come down as people broke through a physical wall in their city as well as a mental wall in their minds as they pushed past the structure that was no longer relevant in their lives. We can do the same with the myths that meat eating is accepted as normal, natural, or necessary. Dr. Melanie Joy makes this very clear in her book Carnism. And again, it's a myth that meat eating is 1, normal, 2, natural, or 3, necessary. We all saw Nelson Mandela walk out from a prison cell to become the president of his country. No one thought that was going to happen. And we've all seen the great progress that's been made in our society in recent years. Restaurants and supermarkets are serving more vegan fare, and the media is far more sympathetic to the vegan movement than in years past. There are now more and more vegan celebrities and sports figures who are adopting a vegan diet with great regularity, and universities are even teaching courses on vegan nutrition. There is, in general, much wider acceptance of plant-based diets and lifestyles, thanks largely to the magic supplied by young people and the internet, with millennials driving the worldwide shift away from meat. As this report states, there's been a 600% increase in people identifying as vegans in the U.S. in the last 3 years. Films like The Game Changers, Cowspiracy, Forks Over Knives, and What the Health have been great catalysts in boosting the public's confidence that plant-based athletes are just as strong as those that eat meat, if not stronger. And if you want graphic proof that you can develop rippling muscles on a plant-based diet, just fire up your web browser and insert 3 words for the search terms, vegan bodybuilders, and hit images. Watch who populates your screen. Do any of these lovely men or women appear protein deficient to you? I call your attention to Mr. Jim Morrison in the upper left. The right-hand image of him is at age 61. The left-hand image of him is at age 71. His images offer proof that plant-based diets can fuel extraordinary muscle development for a lifetime. But more importantly is the muscular body of this man, who is a sweet potato farmer in Okinawa, and he's 100 years old. This is what the human body can do when fueled on a gentle, nourishing, plant-based diet. Now, I know popular fad diets like the paleo style of eating or the keto style advocates a meat-based meal served several times per day. Along with fostering colon cancers and dementia, if these people are seriously advocating a flesh-based diet 3 times a day for 9 billion people, That kind of eating style would require 15 planet Earths, and we only have one. Given the ecological realities we faced, these current flesh-based fad diets that are widely promoted are ever more inappropriate as the Earth's population and its temperatures climb to unsustainable numbers. These people, the real inheritors of the Earth, the children, the generation that comes after us, deserve a better future than what the meat-eating past has provided. These people deserve a better future. We all do. So the most important question we can face at this time is, what's on your plate? These have been big ideas, but this is a time we need big ideas. Talk about them. Think about ways that they can be accepted and instituted. Changing society is what's required, but it's something we can all do, and it all depends on what you say to your friends, neighbors, and family, and what you order for lunch. It's time for us to create a diet for a livable future, and that livable future is one based on whole plant foods. Dr. Michael Klaper here, and I want to thank you for visiting my channel and for watching this video. I've got a lot more content that I'm creating to answer health-related questions for you, my viewers, so please subscribe to my channel down here. And if you found this video helpful, please like it and comment on it. Thanks for helping to spread the word about the power of whole food plant-based nutrition to heal both people and the planet.